I say, so once you've finished, you'll have two little pocket flaps, or two little pockets like this, and then you'll have your two pocket flaps like this as well that will fit over the top of those. So we're just going to place those now onto the trousers. So let's just pop those to one side. And you want them to be as equal as possible. I think it can be sometimes difficult getting things exactly equal. They should be, and I don't know why they don't always turn out that way, but that's sometimes just what happens. So now, bearing in mind that we're going to have a hem along the bottom here, so why don't we just turn that up first? So I'm just going to turn up 1/4 inch and then 1/4 inch. Where's my pins gone? So let's just turn up this bottom first, because that will help us just get the placement exactly right for these trousers then. So just turn up that, just be aware that you want to make sure you don't turn it up so that it's too short for your... Oh, I know, hold on a second. No, I'm doing it wrong, aren't I? Because these trousers actually have an elastic hem, don't they? So let me just iron that out for a second. Because what we're going to do is we're just going to turn it up by the 1/2 inch, because we need to be able to put the elastic through, don't we? So let's just turn that up once, not twice, and press that. Sorry folks, I should have remembered that bit. We're going to have elastic in these, aren't we? So let's do the other one. Because I'm going to take this to the machine and I will zigzag that, but just for the moment let's just make sure these are going to go up the same amount. So we can measure this if we want to. Just make sure that we're going right. Where's my seam gauge? Oops. Okay, I found it. Let's just have a quick look on here. Yes, that's 1/2 inch. So we're turning it up 1/2 inch in order to give us room to zigzag and to sort of stitch that hem down and to put the elastic through. It's only thin elastic, so that should be fine. I am working from my stash, so if you're working with a kit, then just make sure you're turning up enough that you've got enough room to be able to thread your elastic through after you've stitched it down. Don't forget, stitching it down will take some of your free space up. But this will do just for now, just so that we can place the trouser pockets. So let's turn this back over again. Okay, so there's our trouser. So we want the centre of the trouser pocket to go down the centre of that seam, because that will make sure that that's the same on both of them. And if we have our little flap that's going to sit at the top just there, we want to make sure that we're just sort of low enough down but not too low. So what I'm doing is just making sure that's about right, and then I'll use my seam gauge and I'm putting my pocket 1 inch below. So just 1 inch below. So the top of the pocket is 1 inch below the bottom of the top pocket. And I've forgotten to do something else. Oh, I should be following the instructions. We need to just put a row of stitches just across the top here to hold all of that down. So that's what we need to do, only on the top edge, not on the other two. So let's just hold fire for a second. Let's just get our two pockets, decide which is your up and which is your down. I've still got my top stitching thread in. So let me just put that onto that stitch and then put the stitch width up to 3. So the stitch length is up to 3. And then I'm not going to reverse on these, I'm going to just go forward, and then we'll do that little knotting off exercise that we do. And I'm just going to sew in a line just across the top of the pocket to leave some tail so that we can knot those off. Let's just do the other one, just make sure everything's all nicely folded over for you. You should be just catching through that seam allowance that we folded it down when we ironed it. And then we need our hand sewing needle. And then just if you're away from the edge, just do your stitches to the edge, and then we're just going to knot those threads on either side, and then I'm going to just feed it back through just to neaten it off. So that should then give you a lovely, nice, neat top pocket. And I'll try and stop jumping ahead, sorry. I should really pay more attention, shouldn't I? And I'm too busy just over here doing my own thing. I can go over the edge that way, can't I? That would be nice. Okay, that's giving us a stitch on the end. Make sure it stays on the end. And then I can find my bobbin thread, which is my dark grey one. And then I'm just going to do a couple of knots like that. Cut them off so they're both the same length. Thread my needle over both threads, and then I'm just going to feed my needle back along the channel that I've just created, just by doing that. So just make sure you can't see it on the top side, and then you can put a little bit of pressure on your threads and you can snip that off. So I'm just going to do that on both sides, and then I'll meet you back at my wool pressing mat again, and then we'll be able to just put those nicely together onto the trousers. And I will be putting them an inch down from that pocket, so the placing's still the same, but we wouldn't be able to do this little bit until afterwards. And you could argue that is it absolutely necessary, because you won't see it once the pocket has been sewn on. But let's just be nice and thorough, shall we? It just takes a few moments, doesn't it? Okay, so let's go back to where we are then. So let's get the centre of the pocket down the centre seam that goes down the middle of the trouser. It might be a little bit difficult for you to see on these, but that's definitely there. And then we're going to measure an inch down between the top of the pocket and the bottom of the top pocket, the one that was top stitched on in the early stages, and then the pocket there that we're going to be putting on afterwards. And then what I do then with my pins, I'm going to just put one pin in, just keeping that nice and straight, going down. Just be careful because you're going to pin to your pressing mat, but I thought it was a nice area you could see on top here. And then what I do then, making sure this is all nice and straight, is I then put pins pointing to the corners. So I put just a pin just holding those corners into place, because then we can get really close to those without having to take our pins out. So keep the heads of your pins into the centre. Try and keep your pocket as flat as you can. It might move a little bit for you, but it should be fine. It should be okay. And then there's the last one. Just making sure, because you've got a curve on your pocket from your rear dart, so just make sure that's sitting as flat as you can. Get those pins into that corner. Then once you've got those in, I'll take out the one that's holding the centre down, because that's in place now. Just make sure that everything's all tucked under nicely. And then we can take this to the machine, and we're going to sew down the side here. I'm not going to back stitch again. I'll take the threads through to the reverse, and then I'll tighten it off then. But I'm going to go down the side here, top stitching, across the bottom here slowly, because that's quite thick there, and then come up by the side here and then finish off just again there. Let me just hold that for you there so you can just see how that's all pinned on. So we're going to start here, down, across, and then up and finish there. Take all my threads through to the back, I'll knot them off, and then that will then hold those in place for me. Okay, be back in a second. Here we go for our top stitch. Let's make sure our threads are all to the back. So we're now going to start off nice and neat. And we're going to start right on top of that pin. So I'm going to position my needle for the first few stitches so they're just in the right place. And then I'm going to take my pin out ready for starting to stitch. Now hold on to the threads that I've got at the back here, and both of them, there's one, there's the other, and then we'll get started straight away. Just be aware that to take your time, don't go zooming off too quickly, because otherwise you could end up zooming off the end and off the edge at the side. So I'm coming quite close down, so let's put my needle in my work so that that's all nicely anchored down. I've got some raw edges, not raw edges, little threads there, so let's tuck those down. So you can get quite close to your pins before you have to take your pin out this way, and that works really well. So one more stitch, I think let's hand crank it instead, and then we can then twist round. Yeah, that's fine. And then let's take it nice and steady going across this bottom section, because we've got that thickness of the pocket, and we just want the machine to be able to accommodate that. So coming through to the other side now where the other pin is, we can take that pin out. Couple more stitches, I think. We hand crank it. That's nice. And then we're going to come up this side here, just nice and steady again. So this is where your variable speed control can come in handy on your machine if you've got one, because top stitching is one of those things where you want it to go right first time, really. Okay, so let's needle out of the work, and let's just pull that back now. On the top here, you can see I've just gone one stitch further than I'd like to, hopefully. So I'm just going to pull that back through, pull that one out, and that will be fine. Just pull the thread through from the back. And then what we're going to do now is, there's our top stitching for that one. So I'm going to go turn it back over, and I'm going to pull on my bobbin thread, and we should then see the orange thread come through from underneath. And then I can use my quick unpick to go through the loop and to just pull the loop through without cutting it off. And that gives me both threads on the back here and nothing on the front. So we're not reverse stitched, so it's not made a mess here at all. And now what we can do is then just knot these off twice, or 2 or 3 times, depending on your preference. And then find that hand sewing needle that I had before, because it got a nice big eye on it. And you're going to thread that into a hand sewing needle. You can just snip them off, but again, it's all about making sure that everything stays really nice and neat. And then I will just run the needle down in the channel that's created on the edge here, the edge of that stitching, and that will just hide those threads for me. Can pull it through, that's it, and then snip it off. And that's going to give you a lovely finish on the front, and then you've not got any threads hanging out on the back either. Not that anybody's going to see the inside of these, but you know, let's just take pride in our work. So let's pull on that bobbin thread again, let's loosen it through so that it comes through from the other side. Use the head or the point of a needle just to get through the loop. Glasses would help at this stage. There we go, got it. Then we can knot it off. 1, 2, doing 3 this time again. Thread it into the needle, and then just finish it off the same way. And I'm going to do the same, exactly the same on the other pocket, and then we're going to get our top of our pocket as well, so we can position that, and then we can put that in the right place. So let me just get this done. So that's the pocket all nicely finished off and sewn on, looking all lovely. And then we're going to take our pocket flap, and we're going to position that just over the top. So you want it so that the edges of the pocket flap of the pocket are covered, and you may find that one suits it better than the other. So do be prepared just to switch them over and just to try both of them, even though they're supposed to be the same side. It's just useful just to have those in place. If you want to go around your pocket twice with your top stitching, then you can do as well. That's up to you. I've just gone round once on this one. And then again, I'm going to put my pins in to hold the pocket flap in place. Yeah, that's going through everything. And you just want it to lie nice and straight so that the point's down the middle of your pocket. You want to just catch that corner so that you've got it nice and straight. So that's how that's looking, with those pins in towards the centre, and then the point's just here. And don't forget, we've got that open bit on the top there. I mean, I'm probably a bit close. I'm a bit close to mine at the bottom there. Let me just move it up slightly. Because in theory, you want to be able to open up your pocket, don't you? So in theory, and certainly if you want an open working pocket, then that might be something that's important to you. I'm not so fussed about that on mine. But I don't think I'll be putting any carrots. It's Reece, isn't it? Reece has the holster trousers, but I'm not going to be putting anything in there. So now I'm going to take it into my machine, put the needle in, and I'm going to sew across the top here. And that will close up. Remember the little gap we left in the top there? That'll close that up at the same time. So let's do this bit. So I've got my machine set up for top stitch again, and I've got my needle across to the left. And I'm going to just be on the very edge of that pocket. And I start to stitch, pull onto my thread so that they don't get stuck. Let's take a couple of stitches forward. I'm just stitching that very close to the top edge. Needling my work. Take out the first pin. We missed that one when we were sewing, which was great. And we're close enough to this bottom one now that that should be all fine. There we go. Oh, that's looking nice. Even if I do say so myself. And that's how that's looking on there. So I'm going to do this exactly the same as we did before. We're going to find our hand sewing needle, pull the loop through to the back, knot that off, and then that will then be neatened on there. And we're going to do exactly the same for the other one. When we've finished, if you're working from a kit, you may well have some buttons already. I've had a quick look in my stash and found some that I'm going to use for mine, because there's actually buttons on this flap. And I suggest that we attach those now rather than trying to sew it from the inside when it's finished. It's not going to interfere, so I'll just neaten those threads off. But if I just talk about the buttons, so I'm going to choose these buttons here, little wooden ones. Let me just measure these, see how big these are for you. If you've got them in your in the kit, then use the kit ones. And these are 1/2 inch, or so just over 1.5 centimetres, aren't they? And that I think is going to fit just nicely there. So I'm going to have it so the holes are going across, and I'll thread a hand sewing needle and I will stitch that going through all the layers in the dark green. Well, I'll probably use orange thread actually, so there's a contrast, because we've got that contrast going on. And I'll sew that button through on the pocket just there, so that's going to look like that. So, a few bits to do. I'm going to repeat the pocket on the other side. I'm going to repeat the pocket flap. I'm going to neaten off these little threads, and then I'm going to sew the button on to just here. And then I'm going to meet you back then here for the next stages. I have just sewn my button on, but just thinking about it, if you wanted it to be a working pocket, then you could just sew the button onto the flap only, and then underneath you could sew a little press stud, couldn't you? And then that would make it into a working pocket for you. Okay, just wanted to pop back and say that. Okay, so I've just finished putting on both of my pockets now, so I've got those all ready to go. And what we want to do first, just before we forget, is I'm just going to zigzag along both of these hems as well, so that they're all ready to go. Because I think we'll do the hems first before we start to work on fixing these two legs together, because that will just make us a little bit more organised, I think, really. So I'm just going to change my thread back over to my dark thread, and yes, I should have done that before I pressed play, but I forgot, so please forgive me. I'll be as quick as I can. It'll take me 2 seconds. So if we position our fabric right under the edge there and onto our zigzag stitch, I'm just going to leave it at the settings that it's got anyway. Just start the other one straight after here. Okay, cut our thread ends off, and let's take off any whiskers that we've got as well from that zigzagging, just where the threads just get caught up. Just make it nice and neat. Same on the other one. Not too many of the starting threads there. Okay. Oh, there's one long thread there. Yeah. The more I snip them off, the more seem to be arriving. Okay, so we've got that hem turned up that 1/2 inch. So I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's just do that as well now. So take it back to a straight stitch, but I'm moving my needle right across to the left. And I am going to top stitch this again. So we're back over to the dark thread. This is what I say about when you're top stitching things, you really do have to keep going backwards and forwards between your threads. But when you see the finished effect, it really does make it worthwhile. Just make sure that bottom thread's out of the way. Right, okay, so that's ready to go now. So we're going to fold this over, and then we're going to then sew onto the edge here. So if you again pick a point on your presser foot where you are happy and where you know you're going to count, where you're going to actually reach the hem. So mine's going to be there when I need to be up to a 3 stitch as well, don't I? 3 length of my stitch. So let's just take that along there. So I've got my finger so I can make sure that I'm going to hit the edge of that hem. And then we're going to do the same on this one as well. So I'm just going to feed that in on my reference point. And you can pin this if you want to as well. You've got to the end, just make sure that you have caught your hem in all of the places along. The way I do that is I just run my nail across. That's fine. Let's check this one. Yeah, that's fine too. Okay, so then what we're going to do is go and get your elastic, and we're going to thread the elastic through first. And as I say, this is just so that we don't forget what we're doing really, and we don't forget to do that. So let me just grab my elastic. Okay, so I've just had a quick look at the pattern. It doesn't say how long your piece of elastic is going to be. So does anybody want any elastic? Okay, I assume this is left over from sewing face masks. This is for those. So I found an end, which is good. It's all coming unravelled. I need to tidy it up at some stage. So what I'm going to do is I've just got my Harvey here just so I can measure his ankle basically. And we want it to be able to go around comfortably, and I leave a little bit for us to be able to overlap as well. Now I'm not going to have that tight on there at all. I want it to have a little bit of give. So I think that's about right for me. So let me measure that for you and tell you how long I've got mine. But if you've got your character, especially if you're using a Reece that you're making your character for, that's about 6.5 inches long, that piece of elastic is. So let's cut, we need 2 pieces. So let's just do our 2 pieces. Right, so we've got our 2 pieces of elastic here. Harvey, you can wait just over there. So what we're going to do now is, if we get a safety pin, you just need a little one. You need one that's going to be thin enough to go down your channel. Now I just love saving my little takeaway pots. I think this one was from a mango chutney, just because they're just so useful to just pop things in. That's got my safety pins in, and so that's really helpful. So I save those. Okay. Don't know whether you do the same or not, or whether it's just me being a crazy sewing lady. Let me know in the comments. Okay, and so we're going to thread the elastic on the end with the safety pin. Sorry, thread the safety pin onto the end of the elastic. And then what we can do is we find the entrance to our channel. And this is where we hope that we've left enough room for the elastic to go through. And then you scrunch up the elastic along the length of where, scrunch up your fabric of your hem along where the elastic will go. You're hoping not to open up your pin. This one, my elastic is a little thick, so yours might be thinner, but mine is a little thick. So it's going to have a problem going through. So I should have made my hem just a little bit bigger. And I can feel that my pin's come undone. Let me try through from the other side where it's a bit thicker, and then hopefully I'll be able to help it, encourage it through the other side. If not, I'm going to have to undo my hem a little bit and just help that go through. Right, that's going through now. Just feeding that elastic, just pushing the elastic down over the end of the pin, and then you hold onto your pin with your finger and thumb, and then pull on the fabric, and it'll pull your elastic through. Before it gets right through to the end though, I would recommend you just put a little pin on the end here, because it tends to follow you through if you're not careful. So now we need to get through where that seam is, and you'll need to just squish it so that your seam allowance will sit open for you, and then we should be able to pull this through. That's right, it's going now. Keep your fingers crossed for me at this end, otherwise I'll be scooting off to adjust this hem. The technique is still the same, it's just, oh, I think it's going to be fine coming through this way. It was just the other way. Yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to gather that up together for now, and I'm going to pin this now onto my fabric. Just whilst we just work on these hems for the moment. So I've got both pieces of my elastic on. You can see all the gathers there are all together. So let's do the other side as well. I think the other one's looking slightly thicker actually. I haven't been very even on mine, but I'm sure that you'll be perfectly even on yours, on your hems. Pin on. Let's get it started. Start that elastic going in. Just give it a wiggle so that you can get that end of the elastic, because it's a bit stiff, isn't it, first off, to get that elastic end in. So once you've got your elastic through, what I want you to do is just spread those gathers along, and then we're going to take one end off at a time. So take the pin out where you've got the elastic, and then we want to straighten this up so that the elastic is right on the end of your seam. So you can just see a little bit there. And then I want you to put the pin in just to hold that elastic in. You might have to do it at an angle just to make sure that it holds it on. So you've got just a little bit of elastic poking through. Let's go down to the side, and you want to just feel along your channel and make sure there's no bumps in it where your elastic has turned over. You'll get a bump where your seam allowance is, but you should be all right for the rest of it. It shouldn't have a turnover in your elastic. If it does, you need to, where your elastic has twisted in your channel, if it does, you just need to go back in and just straighten it out, because that will then show, if you're not careful, on your finished garment. It just shows as a bit bulky on the end. So let's just do this one as well while we're here. So that's the elastic held on both sides. And what I'm going to do before I do anything else, I'm just going to put a couple of stitches through the end just here. So let me just change my thread again, because we're back onto construction. I'm just going to feed this into the machine. And I'm taking my stitch length down now to a 1. So I'm doing very small stitches, and I'm going to stitch on stitches which will just be within the seam allowance. So keep your finger on your elastic so it can't disappear up inside, and then those very tiny little stitches will just hold that elastic in place. And I'll just swing this one round so I can do this one at the same time. So again, just in that seam allowance, so you're just attaching the elastic to the edge of the fabric. I'll show you how that looks in a second, because then that's just going to hold that for you whilst we do the rest. So it's just right on the very edge there on both sides. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same with the other one, and then I'll meet you back here. So after all of that, you've got your 2 trousers. Let me get them the right way round. Oops, that's upside down, that's that way. We've got our elasticated bottoms on the edge, just cinching those in. We've got our pockets on, and we've got bits of thread everywhere. But then we've got our 2 fronts here. So now what we're going to do is take one front and put it over the other, and you want it so that you've got your flies, which is this bit here that we neatened before with this round bit here. We're going to put that so that it's on top of each other. And what you're going to pin is this crotch point underneath here. And then I want you to put a red pin in just a little bit further up, just about 1 centimetre up from the start of that fly, because that's where I want us to stop. And then on the back here, we're going to, let me just show you, that's the front. Look, there's the fly, and there's the front pocket bag. And this is the bit here that we've just stitched. So I've got the crotch point just here, and then that's going up to the bottom of the fly, but about 1 centimetre beyond there, and we're going to stop at that point. And then on the other side here, so this is going round the front of the trouser, round the front, going down from the waistband down towards the crotch point, and at the centre back as well. Just fold your darts out the way whilst you sew this seam. Let's just put a pin in the middle as well, just to hold that. Use as many pins as you need, and if you want to tack it first, you can. And then holding your darts out the way, let's do this back one first, because that's nice and easy. So let's set our machine up again for a 1/4 inch seam allowance. That was the word I wanted. So we're going to start stitching, we're going to reverse, and then we're going to put our needle in our work. So we're going to take that first pin out. So I've got my darts, as you can see, just folded out of the way. And now we're just going to follow this gentle curve for the rear of the trouser. Then when we get down to the bottom, we're just going to reverse. turn our trousers over again. In actual fact, I'm going to start at that red line, so I'm going to stop at the end. So I'm going to start at that red line, 1/4 inch seam allowance again. So I've just gone past the edge of the fly. Just hold on to our threads, a couple of stitches forward, a couple of stitches back, just to hold that down. And let's follow this section around here. Needle in the work, take our pin out. And we're going to reverse at the end then. Oops. My presser foot does keep jumping down. So let's take that thread off there. Okay, so there we've got a seam just there, look, starting and stopping there, just below the, just about 1 centimetre below that point there, down to the bottom here, and then all the way around that seam here. So now I'm just going to zigzag those areas too. So let's pop it onto zigzag. And let's neaten off those edges. You can zigzag those seams separately if you want to. You could even do them before you sew them together, but I'm zigzagging mine together. You can tell I want to get these finished and get this video uploaded for you. We've got lots of people who've been very excited about having this video. So that's where we are at the moment. Don't really look much like a pair of trousers, do they? But what we're going to do now is we are going to now separate the two legs apart so we can see the inside. And then where we've got the elastic on one leg, you're going to then put that point together and pop a pin in just above the elastic, because it can be difficult to thread through the elastic. And then go to the other leg, put the elastic on top of each other again. And let's have a pin in there as well to hold that together. And if you wanted to tack these together first before you actually sew them up, that might be a good idea, because you may wish to alter the elastic on the bottom of your trousers. It depends how tight a look you want for them. So the next thing that I'm going to do now is opening up the legs up, and then I'm going to put one seam allowance one way on the back, and then the front seam allowance I'm going to put the other side. Now, because, let's just have a think about these, because actually there's a right way and a wrong way, isn't there? So if we put them up against ourselves, this is how I work out which side should be right and which side is going to be left for the fly. So if I hold those up against me, so this is facing towards me, then I know that with boys, left goes over right. So on the left side here, we know that that fly is going to fold back slightly. So it's just in line with that seam. So let me just put a pin in there just to hold that for the moment, because that's going to determine which side this seam allowance goes to. So I want to flatten that seam allowance towards that side too. So I'm just going to put a pin in there at between the centre of the legs, so that when we've got these on, this is going to be the top that's going to overlap over the underfly. Can you see that? Let me just help you with that again. So I've got my elastic the bottom of my hems pinned together just for now, and I've just turned my trousers round the right way round, because what I wanted to establish was which way round this fly goes, because if you remember, you've got these two bits that sort of are the circular bits that stick out on the trousers, there and there. Can you see those? Yeah. And so one of them has to fold back on itself in order to give you a folded edge, so that the other one can wrap behind it, so that when you've got the waistband on, you've got a nice trouser front like this. Let me just show you on Harvey's, because this is how this one is as well. So when we've got that all sorted out, you've got your fly edge here, and then this section here overlaps that fly edge. It's normally where you would have the zip in there, but because these are so tiny, they've not got a zip. But that's what we're wanting to achieve. So this is that, I'm just showing you how I achieve that. So I turn the trousers around so I've got the waist of them facing me, work out which is my left, and my left is going to go on the top. So I know that the right side that's facing me needs to be flat, and then on the left side I just fold that back so it's straight up in line with the seam line, and it's pretty much just touching the edge of the pocket, and I'm just putting a pin in there just to hold that for me. And then I've gone to my seam allowance, and because this left side is towards the left, I'm following that seam allowance all the way down, and I've pinned that seam allowance towards the left as well. So that now when we turn these the right way round, well, the inside out, including the legs, I can see that I've got my seam allowance pinned on the side of on the front of the trouser, so I know that that's going to lie nicely without it twisting over. So I know that the seam allowance on the back needs to go towards the right, and then I'm going to stitch those so that those stitch lines are right together. And once we've got that in place, we can just put a pin in just to hold that through both of them. It's just trying to make sure that we've got a nice smooth transition underneath and up the front of our trousers, because we don't want any bulges where we don't want them. Right, so that's the pins in all. Make sure they're all on the same side. They've got a mixture then. So this is what we've got now. If I show you from the inside here. So we're going from one hem all the way up through the crotch point and then all the way down towards the other hem. And I'll go backwards and forwards through this elastic a little bit on the hem so that we've got that nice and secure too. So you're still on a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So make sure we've got our threads all together. That's it. I'm going to start at one hem, 1/4 inch seam allowance. A few stitches forward. You might just have to help it through the elastic, and a few stitches back. And then let's put a needle in our work, but take our first pin out so we don't go over that by mistake. Just help that through. You're coming up here, make sure your raw edges are together on your trouser legs. Mine's just slightly gone proud, that's it. Keep that needle in the work, just pivot around this crotch point if you need to, just make sure your trousers are sitting nicely. You've not got anything under there that you shouldn't be stitching. And then let's take out this pin at the crotch point and do that pivoting where we leave our needle in the work, lift our presser foot up, and that anchors the needle in the work, anchors it down so it can't move anywhere. And then down here, making sure our hems are the same length. And then I just want to go backwards and forwards over this hem just to make sure that's nice and secure. And then we're going to take our threads off. That's those ones off, and let's take our starting threads off. And now that elastic's all nice, I'm just going to snip off any excess that we've got in there. We don't need that on there now. Okay, so this is the seam that we've just done just here. The next thing that we're going to do now is zigzag along this seam just to neaten it. Again, if you've got an overlocker, you can use an overlocker. I think most people have got zigzag on their machines, that's why I'm using it for mine. I have got an overlocker. Needle in the work to change direction. And just reverse at the end. Again, those extra stitches just help to hold that elastic in place as well. Then take off any whiskers that you might have. Just got a few here. That's it. And just starting and you're stopping threads. Now those who've watched my videos before will know that I'm not necessarily a fan of this kind of finishing off the hems, but the way that I get round it so that I'm happy is if we just turn these round the right way. We can admire our handiwork for a start, because you've now actually got a pair of trousers, which is a thing to celebrate. So there we go, pair of trousers. See those? Okay, but what I do is I don't like how the seam allowance sticks up in the centre of the leg there. So I find where each side is and I want it to go towards the back. Take your stitch off a zigzag stitch, so you're just onto a small stitch, and then I just pop it into the sewing machine and I just catch that elastic or that hem edge, seam edge down against the trouser leg. I'm just doing a few stitches. I don't reverse. I should just hold that down for us. take off your threads. And just because it's just on that inside edge, hardly anybody can see that, especially if you trim your threads off properly, Claire. But it just holds that seam allowance down flat so you can't see it quite so much. There's one that's not been done yet. Kind of holds onto the shape a bit better as well. You see how that one's sticking out? And then that's the one that's been sewn down. So I'm going to do this other one as well, but I always tend to tack them towards the back because I think it's the more natural way for those bits of fabric to sit. And then that will sort those out for us before we then move on. Okay. Well, we are on the homeward stretch with our trousers because we've only got our waistband to do and then we'll be all finished. Threads everywhere as always. So if you want to find your waistband piece, the first thing that I want you to do, or would like you to do, should I say, not want, but would like you to do, is we are going to zigzag one edge, one long edge of the waistband. So just find one long edge and we're going to go along there and just neaten that off. If you don't want to do it this way, you can always turn it up 1/4 of an inch as well and press it, and that will then help as well when we come to it. But because I'm going to probably top stitch around mine, I want to be able to make sure that I'm going to catch the back hem edge of my waistband, and you'll see what I mean in a minute, but that's why it's deliberate to do it this way. So let's just zigzag along this waistband. I haven't reversed to stop that at all. We'll take off any whiskers if there are any, but I think we're pretty good there. Okay, the next thing then that I'm going to do is turn this, let's have a think. No, I'm going to attach it first. Right, so taking your waistband, you want to turn your waistband so that you've got right sides together with your trousers, and you want to find that, allocate it up to the edge of your, find where your underlap of your fly is, so you should have one that's opened out straight, and you're going to start placing your edge of your fly about 1/4 of an inch in from the edge, and then we're going to put a pin in to hold that in place, and then we're going to just map this waistband all the way around this waist, carefully matching it up to the raw edge of the waistline. We're going to press our pleats, our darts for our trouser at the back of our trouser towards the back, so that they sit nice and flat, and they're the same on both sides. And the seam allowance, just have a quick look in your trouser, see which side your seam allowance for your waist should, your back seam should go, and just put a pin in just to hold that in place as well. And then keep following, so I want that dart there to go towards the back seam as well. And then we're following this around. Oh, it's just going to be long enough. And then I'm just going to sit there just nicely. But then you would expect it to be just long enough, wouldn't you? Because it's been very nicely drafted. And then we've got a pin holding our folded piece of fly back for the centre front. So I'm just going to reposition that one so that's holding on to the edge. And you need about 1/4 of an inch on this edge at all. If it's a little bit more, don't worry. But just try not to have it any less than that. You might have to just do a little bit of manoeuvring of your pins if it's less. And then if you would like to, you can go around and tack this now. Leave these ends as they are, that's absolutely right, but just go around and tack that if you want to. Shall I be a rebel and just sew it? Yeah, I'm going to be a rebel and just sew it. Because it is possible to do that, it just depends, but if you feel more comfortable with less pins, then I would suggest that. So let me take it off my zigzag stitch, and we're going to put it back onto 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and then a couple of stitches forward and a couple of stitches back, and needle in the work to anchor that down. The first pin can come out then. So then let's just follow this around, holding everything flat for whilst it goes under the presser foot, and take your pins out as you go. And I've got the flat waistband against my machine bed because I can control how these edges are then, rather than not being able to see them. So by sewing on top of the edge, which has got all the seam allowances, I can keep those all in the right direction and sitting nicely. And you want to sew this on so you've got no puckers on your trousers and no puckers on your waistband either. Just make sure you've got your raw edges together and stop for your pins. And you just keep rolling your garment towards you to give you the next inch or so to sew. Just hold everything out of the way if you need to. Stopping for your pins. That's it, we've got a few pins in place here. And again, I want to roll this again now towards me. So you're taking fabric from the back and bringing it forward, and that allows you then to get around this waistband, tiny waistband. Roll it a bit more and we're nearly at the edge now. Just make sure your fly is sitting there all nicely. I'm just going to reverse at the edge. Take the needle out of the work and cut off our threads and our starting threads. And let's have a little look at how this all looks. So this is how it looks when it's finished. You've got your waistband folded down towards your main trouser. But if we now fold that up, you can see that we've got a nice clean edge all the way around here now. Our darts are all sitting all nicely. Our pleats and our pockets are all sitting nicely underneath that waistband. And you've got this little overhang bit on the front and on the back. So you've got your back fly tucking under and the front fly will go over. And if you've used the same seam allowance all the way around, your waistband should match at that centre front point really nicely. Just here, look, just there. Because what we're going to do now is we're going to fold the waistband in half, so right sides are together, but you're not going to put the edge together. You want to have about 1/4 inch overhang of your waistband. Can you see that? So I've got the front bit of waistband here. That's my seam allowance where I attach the waistband to the trousers. I've then folded my waistband in half, and the seam allowance that you would normally expect to be folded back, because we've neatened it, I've just got that laying flat at the moment, and you'll see why in a minute. And if I get my awl, I'm going to now just stitch from here and get as close to this edge of the front fly as I can do, and I'm going to stop on the edge of my seam allowance there and just reverse. So I'm just sewing across here. Let me just show you. And if you're not quite sure what I'm trying to do, if you just hang on for a second before you actually sew yours and see this when I open it out, you'll see exactly what I'm trying to achieve. And sometimes that can help it all give you a hallelujah moment, can't it? Where we realise. So there's my sewing just there, look. You see that? So now I'm going to snip off that end just there, take out that bulk there, and I'm going to snip off that seam allowance just there. So I've just taken that off at an angle and I've just left that one at the back there, because what happens now is when we turn this through to the other side, it's going to give us a lovely finish. I need a pin just to pull that corner out. So it's going to give me a lovely flush finish with the front of that trouser fly. Can you see that? Really nice and flush. And on the inside, the trouser is extending down because I want to stitch a row of top stitching around this waistband in a minute or two. So I want to make sure that that is down far enough that I'm guaranteed to catch it when I top stitch. And if we'd folded it under, we'd probably have to hand stitch it in place first, and you can do if you want to, that's no trouble at all. Just hand stitch that in place first. What I wouldn't suggest is that you try to pin this, if it's loose, the inside waistband, whilst you try and top stitch. Those two actions won't work together very neatly. Either your top stitching will be uneven or you won't catch all of your waistband. However, if you have your waistband lower, we know that's at least lower than that waistband point there, because I can feel it with my fingers underneath, that my waistband finishes here on the inside and I'm going to be stitching here, so that's going to be nice and it's going to work for me. So let's go and do the other side now we know what we're doing. Just fold that side out for a moment. So let's get our other side here. Fold your seam allowances all up into your trouser, just finger press it, and then you're going to fold over your waistband so right sides are together, but you want to have that little 1/4 inch extending on the inside there. Can you see it extending down? So there's where we attached our waistband to the trousers, and I'm extending 1/4 inch down. Then once we've got that, you can hold that in place. You can pin it if you want to. Just make sure that's nice and got my raw edges together on the short side there. And then now that's in place, I'm going to go right flush to the top of where the fly edge is, and then sew up and down, and I'm reversing when I start stitching and I'm reversing when I finish. It's just a really short seam. Take those threads off, and again that's how that looks. So let's trim this back again. So I'm going to trim off the corner there at the top of the waistband. It's just to reduce bulk. And then we've got a little flap on the seam allowance just here. Can you see that little thing? I'm just going to take that off at a triangle. Just to take that piece off. It just reduces the bulk. And then with both sides, I'm now just going to fold that edge in and then fold it under. And on this side as well, we're going to fold that edge in and fold it under. And then carefully, I'm just using a pin just to take that corner out, being careful not to do what I did before and to pull any threads out, but it should sit quite nicely for you and you should be able to feel that, and there's no real bulk there. Again with this one, let's just make sure this is right to the edge. I want those stitches right on the edge. If I show you that one, there's the edge of my fly where I've zigzagged it, and there's my waistband, and you can just see the little bit of the seam allowance sticking down. So now what needs to happen is I'm just going to find a few reference points. I'm going to feel with my finger to make sure that that waistband is straight, the right width. Is that right? I'm just going to put a couple of pins in just further down, just to hold it down and out of the way for me. Again, you can tack this if you wish to. Let's go this side first, because then we'll work in towards the middle, and you're trying to get your waistband so that it's the same distance from the top folded edge to that seam edge all the way around. So that's in there, and then again on the back here, let's make sure that's all sitting all nicely there. And put a pin just at that centre back point. So there we go. Okay, so now we're back onto top stitching again, so I'm going to change my thread colour over. And this is for the last time, I think. Because the only thing we've got to do then is sew on our press stud and our button. Once we've finished with this, let's just put this back on again. You can see how quick that needle threader is when you get used to it. I know they're a nuisance to learn, but once you've got it nailed, then you're all fine. So now I'm going to put in my trousers, and I'm going to start just an 1/8 of an inch up from that seam line just there. So just really close, and I'm going to do a row of stitching, a top stitching around here now, just to add that detail to the trousers. So let's go on to our top stitching settings. 3 stitch length. And in actual fact, I'm going to turn my trousers inside out for this bit. It'll just be easier to work with. So let's just pop those inside out for now. Oops, that's one pin gone. Just make sure I know where I am. Okay, I did hear a pin drop. I'm really quiet enough for you to hear a pin drop, but I was on that situation. So again, fold the bulk of your trousers out of the way. If you've tacked it, you won't stab yourself on your pins. But I'm just going to line this up now so that I can see the edge of my seam in my window where my needle goes through, and I've just moved in slightly. I've got my stitch length on 3, so I'm looking right in the middle there, and I'm going to just start stitching. I'm not going to reverse, and it's not going through very well, so I can either pull on my threads very gently at the back, and that should help pull the stitches through. That's That's it. It's just getting over the bulk of just starting. Let's put our needle into our work so that we can see where we are. Folding my trousers out the way so I can see that waistband. Now do a little bit at a time. Take your pins out as you go. And again, we're going to do that rolling motion. So I'm going to roll the trousers towards me and flatten everything out before I start sewing. Then once I've run out of room, I'm going to stop and roll the trousers before me, towards me. And then put my pin back in, my foot back down on the pedal. And then roll those trousers towards me. And you're trying to keep it even all the way around. Now coming up to this last one here, so let's just roll that again, so that's all lovely and flat. And then to stitch right up to the edge. I'll need it out of the work. I'm going to leave some tails. Let's have a little look. That's not too bad. I think I've gone in just slightly on one section. Again, this is going to depend on tolerance levels, but I've got my top stitching all the way around here. So let's turn these the right way around so you can see properly. So there we go. That's our top stitching on the edge of our trousers. And that's within my tolerance level. It depends on whether it is or not with you. Most of it is fine, so I'm not going to change that. But if not, you might have to undo some sections for yourself. Then when you get to the end here, separate out your threads and either pull your, depending on how close you are to the edge, you can then either tie your threads off so that you go over the edge, but keep your dark thread into the middle towards the inside of your garment is what I mean. So that gives you a nice neat finish. And then when we've got those off there, let me get my needle again. I'm using it to sew my button on. And you can snip off the excess thread. Thread our hand sewing needle, and I'm going to thread both of these ends together inside and through the inside into my waistband here. So you can see on the inside here I made sure that I caught my waistband, and I'm going to go right in where that knot is, and I'm travelling in between both layers of that fabric for the waistband and then coming out. So give it a little tug so that knot goes inside your waistband, and then with your snips, if you've not lost them, you can then take off those threads. We're going to do that on both sides here. Let's do this one as well. And then we're on to just sewing our button on first onto the front of our trousers, and then we're on to trying them on a character if you want to, and then or just making sure that they cross over properly. Let me show you what I mean by that when we get to that stage. Thread those in right by that button. Right by that button, oh gosh. Right in by that knot. There we go, and we've got two lovely finished edges there with no back stitch at all on the end there. So they're all nice. And that the waistband is the same height and the top stitching matches onto the edge there. So I've got a button here as well, so let's stitch our button on first. So when I'm doing my stitching buttons on, I put my thread double twice. First I've got my two ends together of my thread, and then the fold of that thread where it joins, that's what I thread onto my needle, so that when I sew my buttons on, I'm doing 4 threads at a time. It just means that you have to do less stitches. A little bit lazy, I suppose. It depends which way you like it. Just, I'm going to say more economical with our time. Let's just do a knot at the end there. That's it. Okay. And then the way that I start, I'm going to sew my button on right just centre front just here, and I'm going to have my 2 holes on my button going straight across, the same as on the pockets. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight in from the front and I'm going to go through to the back. So it's going to hide my knot, so I've not got a big knot on the other side. So I'm halfway on that distance between the button, and then I thread my button onto my needle, and then I'm going to go right in, right by that knot again. Then I can just adjust my button, want it right on the edge there, don't we, just like that. Then holding it with my fingernails, making sure it's halfway along the length so it looks right. I'm now going to actually stitch it in place. So the first stitch is almost like a bit of a tack stitch, just to attach your button onto your thread really and onto your fabric. And then I can then loosen that off a little bit whilst I just put my button into place as to where I want it to rest finally. That's got 3 or 4 stitches through, and then on the inside I do a couple of stitches through the stitches that I've just made attaching the button. Pull those tight, and then you guessed it, with the needle I'm just going to travel between those 2 sides of the waistband, so you can't see the needle on the outside and you can't see it on the inside. And then we can just pull on that thread, so that makes it all nice and neat. And just pull it up a little bit, snip off your threads, and then when you snip your threads it disappears away into the centre. And I've done that again with that orange thread to match the buttons on my pockets. So then the only thing that is left now is that we're going to get a press stud, and I'm going to sew a press stud, or a snap if you're in America, I think they're called, onto the back here. I mean, you could also use those poppers, couldn't you, if you wanted to? You could, instead of a button, you could have a popper. So I'm just going to, let me just go and get my press studs, and then we'll pop that on there, and we'll try them onto Harvey and see how we get on. I mean, they're not for Harvey, but they'll do for now, won't they? Just in case you've not seen a snap before, it's a 2-part little fastener like that. This one's got a little knobble on it, and that one's got a little hole on it, and you put them together, and then they fasten together like that, and then you just pull them apart. So to sew these on, I'm going to put which side shall I put on first? We'll put on the one on the underneath of the button first. So I'm going to use the knobble one to go underneath the button. So to do this, I've got my needle threaded with a thread. I'm using a black press stud for this one, so I've got black thread so you don't see those stitches. So I'm going to take 1 stitch through that section where we just sewed on the button, and then I'm going to then take 1 stitch through one of the little holes on the side. I can't see there, can you? There's some 4 little holes here, 1, 2, 3, 4 on there, so 1 over the edge. And then I'm going to, now holding onto the button on the back so I can feel where that is, I want the snap to be directly over the top of the button, so that when we close these we press on the button. And then I'm going to take 3 or 4 stitches just by taking a small bite of the fabric on the underside of that button, and hopefully that should hide our stitches. I've got my thread double as well to try and secure that, so you can't see the stitches on the outside. Then I travel through between the 2 layers and come out at the next set of holes. Put my glasses down because that would probably help me. And then I'm going to take 3 or 4 stitches here with just a little bite of the fabric. 1, 2, 3, 4. So because my thread's double, that's actually 8 strands of thread, isn't it, which is quite useful. And then travelling between the 2 layers again, come out at the next side, and then I'm going to just continue through, and then I'm going to cast off my stitches and leave a long tail by travelling again between the waistband sides of the waistband, and that will then have this side tied on, and then I'll show you how sewn on, not tied on, sewn on, secured on, and then I'll show you this next section. So let's just carry on with this. Oops. Make sure you don't have any little loops on your threads. And then I normally, to cast off, I normally travel from one hole point to another, and just do that a couple of times, because that through the fabric, because that just seems to give you a couple of little securing stitches that aren't going to come undone then. And then I can then go across to the edge of the fabric, give the fabric a little pull and then snip it off. So there's that one sewn right under the edge just there. So now if we hold the front of the trousers flush so that they're lovely and straight up the front across that fly just there, maybe that's way slightly, what I can do then is fold back my fabric so I can see where the little knobble of that press stud is touching the other side of the waistband, and I take just a small bite of my fabric just right where that is. Then we can thread up our needle again, put a knot on the end. And we're going to get this little bit here. So we want the bucket side up so that popper can go inside. And then we want the centre little bit just there. Let's take a stitch right underneath where that pin is. That gives us our placement. So we can take the pin out now. Oops. I'm going to thread my needle through one of the holes on the back of here. Then making sure to hold that in place in the middle there. I'm going to take a couple of stitches just going through one side of the waistband at the time if I can manage that. So I'm just holding it with my fingernail. Just going to 1, 2, 3. Got a little loop there. Hold on, separate out your threads if you get a little loop and then just give it a pull until you find which one wasn't tight enough. That's it. One more stitch and then travel across through into the next hole, and I'm just going to do that same thing, but before I sew too many on, what I do tend to do now, because obviously it's caught me out a couple of times, is I will just pop that snapper together and make sure that that press stud is in the right place at that centre front mark. Mine's slightly low, so I wonder if I can just twist it slightly up that way before I stitch any more. It just allows you just to fine tune it. Yeah, that's better. Before you finish off those finishing stitches. So let me just hold that in place with my fingernail. And now I can do a few stitches in place just to anchor that down. Because I've got to the end of sewing these on before now, and they've shifted a little bit whilst I've been sewing them on, and then I've had to undo them, and that's really frustrating because I think these little finishing touches sometimes do take quite a long time, don't they? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think the waistcoat took quite a long time for Harvey, because it's got 8 buttons on, and then it got 4 sets of press studs on underneath each of one side of the 4 buttons. So that did take a while. Oops, going over the edge of my trousers. So that's 4 stitches there, all nice, and then I'm going to just travel between the 2 just to do a couple of stitches. That just kind of gives it a bit of a nice long end, and then we'll come out over the edge here and snip that thread. Okay, just try that again. Yeah, that's just looking nice there, look. Okay, so finished with my glasses, finished with my machine. Come here, Harvey, you're going to be our model for today. Let me just take off your jacket so everybody can see your trousers very nicely. Do your waistcoat too. Put those 2 on the side, and your trousers. I know you're shy, I know you don't like getting undressed on camera, but everybody needs to see. So there we go. So let's get hold of these. One leg in on one side. And you can obviously give these a press as well if you want to. And there's the other leg going in. Very nicely. Bits of thread everywhere, but that's how my sewing room is. I come out covered. I don't know about you guys. Right, let's straighten up your waistband, Harvey. And And then knitting that off. Just pop that waistband on there. Wow, look at those, they look super smart. So they can have their nice little gathers down at the ankles because they've got the gathers, haven't they? We've got a lovely cargo trouser pocket there, just nice, and seeing all of those. You could possibly have the trouser pocket slightly higher actually if you wanted to. I'm fairly happy with where mine are, but that's how they're looking on Harvey. The front is lovely, sitting nicely. His waistband's the right width. We can pop his hands into his pockets here to give him his attitude, just like that. And if I stand him up as well, you won't be able to see on your camera angle, will you? But that's looking all really, really lovely and great. Let me just turn those around for you so you can see. Probably just need a press, don't they, just to have that sort of. But how wonderful are they? They look fabulous. They're really modern, aren't they? And really look nice. Whereas we've got quite a lot of whimsy on a lot of our Lilly Rose Dolls characters. I do think these trousers are amazingly modern and look really cool, especially with all of that top stitching. So I know it took time to change our thread all the time, and I know we had to go really slow when we were sewing these, but I'm really pleased with how that orange thread looks on all of that top stitching now for him and around his waistband. Okay, let me just turn the camera around and we'll do a wrap up, and then we'll be ready to get this edited and uploaded for you. And so here we are, we have Harvey modelling Reece's trousers, or the holster trousers with pockets, and with those lovely cargo pockets that we've just had a look at the end of the video. So I want to say a really big thank you to Claire and Richard of Lilly Rose Dolls for gifting the pattern for me. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. It's been a really interesting make. It's quite technical in terms of all of the top stitching, but I hope I've given you enough tips and tricks in order for you to feel really confident with sewing those. Remember to tack anywhere you're not sure, just tack as you go along, and that will actually help you quite a lot. If you're more experienced, you might be happy to navigate around pins, but if you're a beginner, then top tip would always be to tack first, because that will hold everything in place without you worrying about prickling yourself on your pins. But yeah, I'm really, really pleased with those. I think they look super, super stylish. Especially in this grey with that orange top stitch as well, and luckily I think you've been able to see most of that process as we've gone along. So if you've enjoyed watching this video and you've enjoyed my sewing techniques, then I would really appreciate if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. Always lovely to know that people are here, and let me know where you are in the world so that I know where you're watching from. And also, if you fancy leaving a comment, or if you want to give the videos a thumbs up, that really does help my channel and helps push it out to other people who might be interested in making these types of clothes and these types of characters, or just learning how to sew the way that I teach if you enjoy my methods, as hopefully you all do. I've also got a Facebook sewing support group as well, so if you fancy joining that, then have a look in my about page on my channel and you'll see a link to that. There are 4 membership questions, and I'm really quite strict on this, so apologies if anybody's asked to join before and I've refused you or declined you because you've not answered all 4 questions. I normally let you know that that's why you've been declined, but just make sure that there's a couple where you just have to just click I agree. It's just really easy to the group rules, and just to make sure that you know you agree there's going to be no unpleasant behaviour, I suppose that's really the. But also just to let me know which areas of sewing you're interested in and where you've heard about the sewing support group from. But there you'll be able to post your makes, and if you get stuck with anything, I can give you a hand and help you along the way. So it's a lot more two-way, whereas YouTube is quite one-way in terms of how we interact. Then within the Facebook sewing support group, if you're on Facebook, then that's a really nice and interactive, and there's a lovely bunch of people there who thoroughly enjoy sewing and doing a whole raft of crafts, and you can post your pictures in there if you want to. It is mainly around sewing. There are some knitting people in there as well, so they're very welcome too, but mainly it's aimed at the sewing. So anyway, that's it from Harvey and I, and from the holster trousers. I'm going to say goodbye, and I hope that you have a really enjoyable time sewing these trousers along with me. So for now, thank you everybody. There's lots more to come, and I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye.